Join the team.
Hey, this is the McGuire Review, and today we're going to be taking a look at Darwin's Choice, so let's get locked in and ready to go. Alright, Darwin's Choice is a brand new one that is currently out on Kickstarter, so you can go check this out on Kickstarter right now. And I highly suggest that you do, because it's actually a pretty fun game, and I think it really gets into the mechanics of how you build these animals and these species over the course of the game. And we'll talk about that here in a second, because I'm really going to focus on some of the high-level mechanics that I like and I think makes this game special and differentiates itself from others in the market that might be a little similar. We'll talk about that here in a second. So Darwin's Choice, it is a 2 to 6 player game, 10 plus, and it's from Treeceratops Games. Again, out there on Kickstarter right now. You can go check it out. The link is in the description below, so go check that out and you'll see the link here. Bear, hold that for a second for me, buddy. The first thing that we want to do is we want to talk about, we are going to do another giveaway on this prototype. So this is a prototype edition. The little wooden holders here for the various chits are not going to be included in the giveaway, but everything else that you see will. And it is prototype artwork. It isn't final production quality stuff, but I will say that most of the artwork on all the cards that I have seen look really good. Obviously, through the Kickstarter, there's going to be some more stuff that's going to be added in, but the actual quality of what you're getting here in this prototype, you could call absolute production quality, in my opinion. I think they've done a really nice job with the pre-production version of this game, especially the one that I have here. So we will be giving this away. So on June the 19th, we're going to run it about 1 month, that week right after Origins coming up. Yes, can't wait for Origins 2018. Right after the Origins week, we're going to give this away. So June 19th, you want to hit that subscribe, comment below, and Bear will press the button to fade on June 19th, and someone on the team will get this prototype version of Darwin's Choice. Now, let's talk a little bit about what might be the elephant in the room, we'll say. So how is this game different thematically or mechanically than some of the games that are already out there today that are somewhat like this? And I know the one that's probably on everyone's mind, which is Evolution. Now, I don't like to do compare and contrast in these videos because I like to focus on the game at hand and tell you about this game. But I think because there's so many similarities when it comes to theme, I do want to hit that right before we dive in. Is this game worth purchasing if you already have Evolution or you already play Evolution? And the answer to that, in my opinion, is yes. And the reason is because it is mechanically different, and there are things in this game that are very different from the perspective of your environments that you have to interact with. You do have to migrate to different environments. You don't just have one environment. It's not all about just the build of your various species. It's also about the environments and how those species interact with those environments. It's also about, which I think is very cool, our event deck here. So there's various events that will happen over the course of the game that will change the landscape of what's going on. And you may have the biggest, baddest, strongest species out there that may be as adaptable as it can be to one of these environments. And all of a sudden, because an environment changes, now that species has to migrate. And it's not as powerful maybe as it was before. Or maybe due to a certain event that happens. And we'll take a look at these events really quick. So this one's optimal conditions, so nothing there. So low meat supply. During the next era, the food supply is set to 8 and carnivore food is 3 in each vegetation zone. So that may change the amount of food, whether it's plant or meat eaters, within each one of those environments. We got a continental drift. A rift is formed between the vegetation zones to the left and the middle and the right of the middle. Migrations across the rift are not possible during an upcoming era, so that may cut off a species from being able to migrate from one environment to another, which may be detrimental, and your species may die because of that. We got an ice age, a volcanic eruption, a mountain formation, a meteor strike, an epidemic, flood. It goes on and on and on. Of various different events, they're going to affect the environment. And that's something that is new and different, and I like that. And it adds this level of flavor to the game where even if you've been successful in building the most adaptable species, and you can see how unique they are, crocodile head with with an elephant body and legs here, and a beaver tail. And that's only one example. You can see each one of these are a little bit different. We got a bear with some penguin feet and a polar fox tail. We've got the humpback whale gorilla. So you can build really unique and funny things. I think that's a nice aspect of this game as well. As it doesn't feel like it's just one type of species with various different attributes. You really can get creative with what you're building species-wise to adapt to the environments. So it feels more primordial. It feels more, I don't know the right word for it, but it's flat out fun. Yeah, we got a little bear action here. Grizzly bear. We got our buddy Bear in on this one in the polar desert. I'm not sure if you're a real polar desert guy, but I hooked you up. So, all right, let's hit some of the components really quick, and then we'll get into overall what the gameplay feels like. So we will have some reference cards right here, which I think they did a nice job with. It tells you your possible actions that you're able to take on your turn, as well as the point distribution when you get to allocating these Darwin points. And those will go to the most, adaptable species that you're building at the end of kind of a round. There's a phase for that where you'll allocate out these Darwin points. And depending on how many of these Darwin points you have, that sort of signifies thematically how successful you're being as a species. And you'll be able to use those points to continue to modify or mutate, as they call it, your various species that are on the board. On the other side here, you've just got a kind of a symbol table that goes over all the various symbols in the game and what those symbols mean. And there's a food distribution here that will kind of run you through when you get to the food distribution phase after you've gone through your actions. It will kind of run you through the various rule set that takes part when you allocate food. Everything, in my opinion, is pretty simplistic as far as how the game plays out. And I think it's designed very logical. All the rules really make sense, and when you go through the game, it feels like, well, that's kind of what would happen if this was playing out in reality. We then have our Darwin points, which we hit a little bit there. There's some cards up here that have some tokens with numbers on them and cards. That's basically going to be used to lay out your zones that are on the table, and you'll have a number of them depending on how many players you're playing with. Again, 2 to 6 players. I've got kind of a 3-player board set up here. You're then going to have these champion tokens where you got gold, bronze, and silver, and you'll allocate those out to your various different species depending on the ones that have the most strength, and that's going to be your little, every one of these cards have these little trophies on them right here, and you'll be able to see which one is the strongest species by adding up all of those trophies on various cards. So there is strategies on, do you want to be the strongest? Do you want to be the most adaptable to the environment? Do you want to just kind of have a species that's able to sort of migrate to one area or the other if you have to kind of make a quick getaway? So there's different strategies you're going to want to think about when you're designing your various species. That's what these are going to be for. And that's going to take place near the end of a round. It's kind of one of the last things you do. You'll allocate out these little champion tokens. You're then going to have your plant food, and those are designed where some of them have like 2 and 3 leaves on them, and that's going to be your food. You're then going to have your meat pieces, same thing. Some of them have 1, 2, and 3 meats on there. You're then going to have a stack of environments, and here are environments that we have here. Bear, load up the overhead view, buddy, so we can see all of the stuff that we got on the table. And you guys can kind of see what we're looking at here a little bit up close, because we're going to get into some of these cards. I'm going to explain what makes these cards unique. So when we look at our environments here, we've got the wetland, we got the coral reef, and we got the polar desert that's out in front of us now. Well, there's a ton of other different types of environments that you're going to be able to go through over the course of the game. As you'll draw these out, and you'll replace environments in the beginning of each new full era. And there's 4 eras in the game, so you can think of it as like 4 giant rounds of play in the game. So you'll be changing your environments that are available, and that's where the migration aspect starts to get into a lot of fun. Or, hey, you might be the champion and the most adaptable right now, but guess what? Certain event just happened, and now you're in the desert, and you're a swimmer. What are you gonna do now? Well, you better get to migrating to another environment that's going to give you the ability to be a good swimmer or die. or be eaten. You're then going to have your events we talked a little bit about. So we've already kind of gone through those, but one of those is going to come out with each one of the eras, and that's going to be something that's going to be really unique and affect the game and add some replayability for each game, as well as the environments, because you got quite a few of each one of these. That's going to add a little bit something different for you each time you play through. All you're going to find here with these tokens is a color for each player, and you're going to basically use these as you play the game. You're going to put your little token on whichever animal is yours, because this isn't like this is one player's area, another player's area, another player area. Players are going to be adding and building species to different environments that are out on the board, and you'll want to ensure that you understand, whose is whose species, right? And after you're done with your turn and you go through your actions and you're able to mutate your species or swap parts out or build a species, you then would just switch this token over to the check mark indicating that you're kind of done with your turn on that particular species. These are really just more of a visual aid for the rest of the players around the table. Then the last thing we're going to have is our actual animal cards. And you'll see there's a smaller deck and a larger deck. The larger deck is going to be the main part of the animal. So the back, the kind of middle of the animal, the legs, and there's all kinds of different, you got foxes, you got ostriches. I mean, there are tons, sharks, snakes. I mean, there are birds. There's tons of different types of these cards. And then these smaller animal cards are going to be like the appendages. So they're going to be like the tails and the arms and the legs and the heads that you're going to put on those bodies. And again, tons of those types of things as well. Snakes and hippos and what do we got here? A kind of like a camel. Even dinosaurs, a Triceratops. So that's pretty cool that they went back and added sort of the dinosaur components into this game as well. More dinosaur components, please. That's pretty fun. Now let's talk about what you're going to do to start the game off, because I think that's unique as well. Every player will get to draw one at a time cards from these decks. And you're going to draw up to 10 cards to form your hand for that era. And I like that because you as a player can choose how many cards to draw out of each one of these decks. So you want to look at the card. You don't have to, but I think that's smart to do that. You want to look at the card to see, okay, I just drew a body and it's a bird. All right, well, what are some of the attributes of that? You may want to pay attention to that as well. Well, it can, hang, it can fly, it can walk and exist in like a greenery type area, like this wetlands. So, that's good. Well, let me draw another one of those. Now I'm up to 2 cards. Ooh, I got another bird. All right, well, that's okay. Maybe for my third card, I'll go and I'll draw something from here. And I see, wow, I got a giant anteater tail. And you're going to keep going until you've acquired 10 animal cards, both from the larger deck as well as a smaller deck combined. Okay, 10 in total. And then from that hand of cards, you're then going to, over the course of that era, create your species. Well, you may think, well, what if I just get a bad 10-hand card draw? And I just really can't do what I want to do or a lot. Well, one of the actions you're going to get to do on your turn is actually trade and or card redrawing. So every time it's your turn, you're going to do a few different things. You're going to get to build, which is basically starting a new species. And to start a new species, you have to at least have a head and a body. So his would be an example of building a new species. Well, you can put more cards on that if you want. And there's little dots on these cards that actually show you the points of connection. Where this one here has the fins, there's no point of connection down here, so there's nothing else that you would build onto this. There's nothing else that you would build onto the back of this. Whereas, if we look at this card here, it's got all kinds of points of connection. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of connection. So you can put 2 different types of legs, a tail, maybe some wings off the back, and a head. So every card is going to be a little different on how many connection points you can do. So you have to at least have a head and a body. You can build it out further if you want to, but maybe you want to hold back because you may want to use those parts for another species. That's building. You can mutate, which means you can swap out a head for a head. You can add a component. You can just take a component off that you maybe don't want there anymore and pull that off and maybe put it onto another species down the road. Now you can do something called a double mutate. For free, you can mutate once, but if you want to mutate twice, which is you want to do essentially 2 things to that species, you have to pay 3 Darwin points for that second mutation. And again, to be able to do that, it's going to have to be a species that has survived through a round or an era of play, and it's acquired some of those Darwin points because it was very adaptable to the environment that it was in. In that case, you would then have those Darwin points to be able to spend to further mutate your species that you have here. Okay, and that's mutate. Again, you can only do one of these actions, so you need to decide which one you're going to do. You're going to build, you're going to mutate, you're going to migrate. Migrate is actually taking a species and moving it to another one of these environments because it no longer is able to survive in the environment that it's in. All right, and then again, you can do trading and card redrawing. So that's the action that helps us out. If we've got a weak hand, we can do some redrawing of cards, and or we can trade cards with other players, which is a fun mechanic as well, because you may have some stuff in your hand that benefits others and vice versa. And I like that. I like that they give the player the option to either just go back to the, let's hope I get something better, versus giving another player maybe something that they need, or we're going to have a little negotiation and trade amongst ourselves to get what we need. So it gives the player both of those options to be able to do that, and I like that from a mechanic perspective as well. All right, now let's take a look at a little bit of our environment here. So, and I'm just going to pull this one right off the top. This is an ocean environment. And right on the ocean card, it has a little 2 right here. That means how many Darwin points are going to be gained from this environment if you're able to win in this environment or have the most adaptable species in this environment. It indicates right here that the whale tails, so swimmers, are species that are going to be most adaptable swimmers in this type of environment. So you're not going to want something that's got like elephant legs on it. That's not going to work in the ocean, right? You're going to need something that's able to swim and swim effectively. So when we look at this creation here, it's interesting because this one has 3 of the elephant feet, which is adaptable in the wetlands, but it also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whale tails, which would be highly adaptable in the ocean as well. It's also adaptable in the wetlands because it shows here our wetlands card has both the little elephant feet as well as the whale tail. So it shows that this type of species would be adaptable in both of those types of environments. So you want to think about how you build out your species. Do you go all in with a certain type of environment? Or do you meet the need of that environment, but also give them a little something else ready for that migration down the road if it doesn't work out within that environment, due to an event or the environment itself changing? There's going to be 6 plant and 8 meat that's going to be available within this environment, and it shows you that right on the card. And then down here, it's going to show you what you necessarily need to have to exist in that environment. So it's not just, hey, you need to have some swimming ability. You need to have swimming ability, but you need to have at least 2 to exist in the ocean. And every one of these environments are different. So if we look at the wetlands here, it says, you know what? You got to have one or the other. You need to have 1 of the elephant feet, which means you basically can walk on land, or you can have 1 of the tail. Well, the creation that I've made here, my species here, actually has both of those things, so they're doing pretty well. They don't necessarily have to. They could be just a swimmer or just a land walker. Whereas if we go over here to the polar desert, it says here that you can't have animals that have heat resistance or animals that exist or survive well in heat environments. You got to have animals that survive well in cold environments, and it has to at least have 2 of those markers on the cards. And you'll see that every one of these cards for our animals, all the different small cards and the large cards, have these little symbols on them. So if we pop this one up, you'll see this card here has a trophy. That indicates that it's a good, strong part of an animal. And it has 3 whale tails. And it has 2 of the cold indicators. So this is an animal that swims, is fairly strong, and can survive in the cold. There's also these little tiny hearts that's on these cards. And the hearts represent how much food that animal is going to eat, regardless of them being a carnivore or an herbivore. That's going to show how much food they eat. And what you'll do is you'll go around, you'll add up those hearts. We look at our grizzly bear, polar fox, penguin here. We'll see that they have 1, 2, 3 hearts. So I'm going to need 3 pieces of food to feed this particular species. And you'll want to watch that as well, because over the course of gameplay, once you get through your action phase of doing mutating or migrating or building, you're then going to get to a food phase where you're now allocating out, in a certain order, species eating food. If they can't eat enough food, if they can't get the food they need, they die. Just like in reality, just like in nature, if they can't get enough, they can't survive, they'll die. They could be eaten by bigger, more powerful carnivores. That's another way they can die. If they need to migrate to an area, and that new area, they just can't survive and they can't mutate in that area, they'll die. So there's lots of ways that your species will get created and they'll just get killed. So don't focus so much on creating this master species, because things may happen in the game that will throw that off, and all of a sudden now they're extinct. And I think that's what makes this particular title so much fun, is that you're working lots of different mechanics on the board. You're watching your environments. You're watching your various different events that are going to be happening. You're creating fun species that do different things. So thematically, I think this game does a really good job. Visually, I think the game does a really good job. I think it is a lot of fun, even for the younger folks, to be able to see sort of creating these little animals. I do find some of the younger kids, they love it whenever the dinosaur parts come up. That seems to be a big winner every time. Plays light, and it plays pretty quick. So Darwin's Choice, go check it out on Kickstarter. It's up live right now. And remember the giveaway we're doing on this one. Hit that subscribe, comment below, and you'll be able to get in on the giveaway, which we're going to do June the 19th, right after Origins. So hit that like, click the subscribe below to join the team, ring the bell. This has been the McGuire Review, and we'll see you next time. Roll them crits. Let's go, Bear.